All right, David, can we hear from you?
Absolutely, although I don't know you need to. Exactly what you just said was what I was about to say about questioning whether we should start recording. I'm one of many contributors to the book. I'm the co-founder and executive director of World Beyond War. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, in the United States. And I would note, Kathy, that we use this same link for all kinds of public events. And I don't know if Carlota is somebody who's on your list of people for this book club, but she's somebody who was here when we got here, or has just simply failed to sign out from some event 6 hours ago. So you might want to just check that you recognize everybody's name here as being here for the book club.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll try to check that maybe through the chat with Carlota. How's that? And could we go on to Ann Wright?
Hello, Ann Wright in the occupied sovereign nation of Hawaii. I'm one of the, have a chapter in the book. I'm a retired Army colonel, former diplomat, resigned in opposition to the war in Iraq in 2003. And since then, working with great people like Kathy and David and all of you all for peace in our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And I have Harry and Joan Thornhill on the screen. I don't, perhaps Joan, are you there?
Yes, I'm Joan Thornhill, and I have been working with the Qatari Tech with the peace conferences over the summer with John, and I work in the kitchen. And I'm a member of Women Against War, and I'm on the steering committee for Grannies for Peace here in Albany.
Well, thank you, Joan. Thank you very much. And could we go to, sorry, my list just changed here, but Marjorie Moffat.
Yes, I live in Montreal, Canada, and I've been active in peace and justice movement since the 70s. And then I suddenly realized that I needed to, something like I read in the book, to go and walk with people in another culture. And so I worked in the northern Canada, not schools, thank God, but they were all demonstrating against the low-level flying in Labrador, and I participated in events with them. And then my first memory of actually activism was in a demonstration. I was hiding behind my placard, and I was demonstrating against the Northern Pipeline. Mm. And but now most of my activities are through this organization of World Beyond War. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And could we hear from Deborah Buffton?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm in La Crosse, Wisconsin in the United States. I'm a retired professor of history, and I have always been interested throughout my professional career in the effects of war on society and peace movements and things like that. I've developed courses on peace and war and nonviolent resistance movements, things like that, and have been involved in some peace activism and demonstrations, most recently in St. Paul, Minnesota, protesting the Line 3 oil pipeline. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Al Mitty, could we hear from you?
Hi, yeah, I'm Al Mitty. I live in the Villages, Florida, which is a very large retirement community full of old white people. Years ago, Kathy, you don't remember this, but you were an inspiration to a bunch of people in Indianapolis, and you helped us to get our Pax Christi chapter started there. You still are an inspiration. Now I'm retired. I am a coordinator for a local chapter of World Beyond War and a co-chair for the Florida Peace and Justice Alliance.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I imagine we both know Fran Quigley.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, I
yes,
remember
very,
that. I do remember
very
that.
well. Yep.
So, could we go on to Aryan Mahmoud?
Hi, I am living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm an Afghan American clinical social worker. I'm a somatic psychotherapist, and I've primarily focused on the stories we tell and the stories we carry in the body, as well as as a social worker, the kind of social mapping of how that lives out on a larger scale. And as part of my work, lifelong work called The Ecology of Being Human, it's now time to address the nexus between the environment and war. So I'm here to kind of see where my tribe is and make my best contribution and just connect, and let's see what can happen.
Thank you. Aryan, could I ask you, where are you located again?
In Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay, thank you very much. And if we could move on then to Bill Cantalone.
Good morning, everyone. It's morning here. I live in Victoria, which is on Vancouver Island in the province of British Columbia, so just across the strait from Seattle. And I serve with the United Church of Canada. I was to have retired just a few days ago, but because of the pandemic, I'll be going for a little longer. I just recently completed 2 courses with World Beyond War, one last fall and one just recently on the environment. So it's great to be with you today.
Well, thank you, Bill. That's a lot of work doing 2 courses. Thank you. Bill Timpson, may we hear from you?
Fort Collins, Colorado, retired professor of educational psychology at Colorado State University. Focusing in the last 20 years on sustainable peace building. I have a project in Burundi, East Africa. It started with a Fulbright Award and then went to Rotary Global Grants on peace building. And they've been very supportive of building something there. Had awards to Northern Ireland and South Korea, Graduate Institute of Peace Studies, and doing a lot of publishing. Took a course with David Swanson and he changed my thinking. So that was a good thing most of the time. And I'm actively working on a book on moving through conflict towards constructive, sustainable solutions.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Bill. And Carlota, I haven't had a chance to get together with you on the chat, but would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, so let's move on to Darlene Western.
It's actually Darlene in Western New York.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Darlene.
Hello, everyone. I suppose a little bit like Aryan, I am looking for my tribe, and I've been exploring other ways to use some of my skills locally. And my lifelong question has been, under what conditions humans choose change? And I'm actively also exploring the ways personal and spiritual development affect our actions in the world. So for me, when I think about violence, I think about violence begets violence, and it starts inside of us. And so that's the way I explore things. And I've been supporting World Beyond War and a number of other peace organizations in very quiet ways.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wonder if we could go on to Ilana Naylor.
good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I am thrilled to be among you. I think I live out the creed of thinking globally and acting locally. I saw the book dedication and read the chapter by I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, but to Blaise Bonpane. In 1985, I went with the Witness for Peace and C-Space in the delegation from Virginia to Nicaragua. I slept soundly because 15-year-olds, because we were on the border between Costa Rica and Nicaragua. And I slept soundly at night because 15-year-old young men were carrying guns around our sleeping quarters. And I don't mean to say I slept soundly because of the guns. I'm saying they were willing to put their lives in front of mine when the point of going with the Witness for Peace was to put our lives in front of theirs. With the upside down kingdom that white lives are more precious in the world than people of color. So anyway, so there's so many avenues one could take with that. But in returning, I am the birth mother of a group called Unity in the Community in Manassas, Virginia, and Prince William County. We have been celebrating diversity and challenging diversity since 1995. And if you give me permission, and I figure out a way to do it, I'll put in the chat box a virtual event we're having for the Interfaith International Day of Prayer for Peace on September the 19th, but it'll be virtual so you can see it anytime you want to. Unity Community has been involved with immigrant communities. We're now working collegially with, because we're so close to Dallas Airport, with resettling immigrant refugees from Afghanistan. I was arrested twice in front of the White House because of the Iraq War, but I have not paid the price that some of you have paid. And I see a number of names here on the screen that were authors in this book. And my deepest thanks to you. And I've heard a few people say that you're looking for your tribe. Maybe I can be in that category also.
Thank you, Ilana. Thank you. Nancy Freeman.
Yes, I was a war baby. I didn't see my father from the time I was 1.5 years old till 4.5 years old. And I heard 100 times from my grandfather how FDR had lied and said he wouldn't send his sons to our sons to fight another European war. Now I have read FDR Goes to War, so I know the truth. Now I mainly have been an environmentalist in Arizona, but I am associate Veterans for Peace member, and I discovered David Swanson in his great books. War is a Lie is the one that just blings, and so I've just really been on the fringes of the peace movement, that very supportive groups. And I'm really happy about the taking into account the climate change that is caused by wars, because I have a lot of information on destruction of our forests, national forests in Arizona due to copper and uranium mining. So I'm kind of informed on that subject.
Thank you very much. Could we go to John Amidon? John?
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Sure.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. I
Hello?
don't see you yet, but I hear you.
Oh, you do hear me.
Right, there you are.
Huh, I wonder why you don't see me.
I see you now.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad to see me. Hi, everybody. Wonderful. Sorry for this beginning, but anyway, I'm the founder of the Kajuri Peace Conference, and it began in 1998 actually as an interfaith pilgrimage close to School of the Americas, and I've worked on the book, one of the editors, and contributed to chapter, and have to thank my co-facilitator and longtime friend Maureen Aumand for the real genius of the conference. And that's what I'd like to say right now. Thanks.
Thank you, John. And Jose Luis Sanchez. Maybe we can come back to Jose. And Maureen, could we hear from you?
I can unmute myself. I have to say, and this is not hyperbole, I'm moved to tears simply by, I love Ariana's obviously very useful framing of being in alignment with this tribe. Thank you so much for being here. As John said, I jumped onto his bandwagon in around 2003 with the Kachiri Peace Conference, and we were happy to expand it to reach by working on this book. I'm like Joan, I'm a member of the Albany-based Women Against War and Grannies for Peace. Again, it's the tribes that keep us going. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Kathy.
Well, thank you, Maureen. And could we hear from Myrna Gordon?
Yes, hi everyone. I live in Port Jefferson, New York, which is on Long Island, and was affiliated in the 60s with Another Mother for Peace and the Warrior Sisters League. Currently, we are a peace and justice organization out on Long Island called the North Country Peace Group, where we have been standing for the past 19 years every single Saturday, protesting for peace and justice. In fact, we just got back a few minutes ago from our weekly vigil. And I just want to say how wonderful it is to hear everyone's stories. And I look forward to the next several weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Felicia Parazaider.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see all of you. And really what a treat it is to be here together on a Saturday. So I'm on the stolen lands of the Fernandeño Tataviam, Tongva, and Chumash people, also now known as North Hollywood. And I am the founder of something called the Revolution of Love Ministry and Movement. So it's a multi-path ministry, and it's a movement because we believe in abolition, we practice transformative justice, and we believe in what is rather than, what ought to be rather than what is. So I've been an activist for 20 years. I mean, if you read the book, if you read my chapter in the book, then you might know that. And I've really ran the gamut as far as tackling different forms of violence and colonization. And I'll say one more piece. Let me tune in. I think a lot of my work is devoted to agitating people that are not probably people that don't believe the way we all do. I'm making a broad stroke here and a generalization, but a lot of my time is spent agitating folks that still believe in war, that still believe in militarism, that can't think or vision outside of that. So that's one of the things that I get to do with the time that I am here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Susan and Chuck Peretti.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi.
Hi. Myrna was just talking about the North Country Peace Group, and we've been members of that for a long time. And that's the local kind of part of it, is standing in vigil every Saturday from many years, since before the beginning of the war in Iraq. we were part of the big demonstrations, like many of you probably were, in the cities across the world. For myself personally, I was active as growing up as a teenager in the efforts to stop the war in Vietnam. And then that sort of moved on, and I've been in different phases of that. I'm a former reporter, and I'm a writer, and I've been just finishing a book that's a memoir about breaking cycles of violence, both personally in my family and as a peace activist. So I was very interested in reading the chapters about how people came into the movement. And it's really interesting to me because I've come to the conclusion that it's just something that you have to do, and you have to follow it. It's in your gut, it's just, you have to do something. And because I don't know how we all ended up here, but I'm glad I'm here. So that's all I guess I'll say for now. Only that I was involved with Pax Christi also for a number of years, and participated in conversations with some Afghan people, peacemakers.
And Chuck?
Hi, I'm very happy to be among people who are on their journey to try to understand their relationship to peace internally and peace in the world that we live in. It's my pleasure to read the book, and Susan and I have enjoyed the chapters immensely. I also want to thank everyone for showing together a collective consciousness, being part of the meeting house at St. James of Quakers. Our collective consciousness is building, I'm certain of that. In addition to work with North Country Peace Group and all of the actions that required, both political and nonviolent obstruction, I'm also the spiritual director for Philemon Fellowship, which is a prison ministry, reentry service. And you never know where we can learn from. And there's nothing I rule out in terms of a source for wisdom and love. So thank you so much for your work and continued efforts.
Thank you, both of you. And going up to Canada, Tamara.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tamara Lawrence. I am based in Waterloo, Ontario, which is just southwest of Toronto. This is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral peoples along the Grand River. This land is supposed to be governed by the Treaty of the Dish with One Spoon, where the colonial government promised to work with Indigenous communities to share resources and to live peacefully and in a friendly way. But of course, this hasn't happened in Canada. I'm a longtime feminist and environmentalist, and it's really because of my concern about the environment and climate that led me to be more engaged in peace work and activism about 25 years ago. So I'm a longtime member of the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I'm also involved in the No to NATO, No to War network, with the Global Network Against Nuclear Power and Weapons in Space and World Beyond War. I'm doing my PhD at the Balsillie School of International Affairs at Wilfrid Laurier University, and my topic is focusing on the climate and environmental impacts of militarism. I wanted to let everybody know that today, the US F-35s are flying in the Toronto Air Show. And if I wasn't in this call today, I would be protesting at the Toronto waterfront, the F-35s flying today. But tomorrow there's going to be an action of peace activists protesting against these F-35s, because right now, Canada is considering buying a new fleet of fighter jets, and the F-35 is one of the planes that we are considering buying. But I'll just end by adding that we have been struggling very hard over the past 10 years to stop Canada from buying a new fleet of fighter jets. Canada is the only country that has resisted so far buying the F-35s. All of the other countries part of the development consortium have bought them. So I'm hoping for success, for victory in the next year to stop the new government we're in the midst of a federal election. There's going to be a new government at the end of September, and I'm really hoping that peace activists across Canada are able to successfully prevent our country from buying a new fleet of fighter jets, because as you all know, we need to stop fighting. Thanks.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you very much. And Tisha Douthwaite.
I live in rural Northern California, north of Ukiah, and I'm about median age group here. Probably got involved in the Vietnam War struggles and being a hippie and all that back in the 50s. I've been a big fan of David Swanson's for a while. I've taken several courses and read his books. And, you know, I like to support for small groups that seem to make a big difference, which I think this group qualifies as. My main connection is also in environment, currently studying about the microbes in the soil, and just shocked with what agriculture has done to the soil, but that's another story. So environmental and militarism is something that I've also studied. It's like we can't really deal with the environment without addressing the military impact, which is under-addressed. And what else is new? I identify as a Buddhist, so I'm a fan of the Dalai Lama's saying kindness is my religion. So that's kind of a 24/7 practice in terms of mindfulness. And I'm currently a retired healthcare provider. So that's been my history. I think that's enough. Let's get on with other people. Thank you all for caring.
Well, thank you. I think perhaps we've heard from everybody that's on this call, but if I've missed anyone, could you please speak up now?
Hello, good day. My name is Jose Luis Sanchez. My activism started as an anti-Vietnam War and pro-independence of Puerto Rico activist when I was 18. It has since moved into environmental and racial justice activism. A couple of years ago, I was directing a speaker series, and I had the great privilege of inviting Father Roy Bourgeois and Reverend Chris Antle, who's featured in this in your anthology, to be speakers, and they remain among my, favorite memories of that speaker, of a 5-year speaker series. I think it was a spring of 2019, sorry. Spring of 2019, I enrolled and took the David Swanson 6-week course. And I've been working since on learning more about peace activism in general and how it actually even works as a container for and connector for the environmental activism that I've been working on for a few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to have that phrase that's been entrusted to us now, that we're looking for our tribe. And I hope that this time together will be a time of both education and activism. Realtors say location, location, location. And I think in spite of all of the need for activism, we also have to emphasize education, education, education. And I sense that we'll all be able to educate one another quite a bit. Please feel free to use the chat function in order to enter in other ideas. Ann Wright has already asked for a link for the International Day of Peace, for example. And I want to invoke the words of Albert Camus from Neither Victims Nor Executioners as we get started on discussion today. Camus said at one point, "We're in history up to our necks." And then he said, "I, for my part, will wage the formidable gamble that words are stronger than weapons." And as I looked over contributors thoughts in Bending the Arc, you constantly go back to that idea. Words are stronger than weapons. And I think right now, as we've watched the media pay more attention in words to Afghanistan in the last 2 weeks than really were paid over the last 20 years, when Afghanistan was almost shrouded in secrecy during much of that time. We now have a lot of people caring perhaps more about Afghanistan. And yet we don't really have much of a sense as yet for actually ending the war against Afghanistan, given the over-the-horizon drone attacks that are still being planned and executed. And also, it would seem to me that a part of concluding any war is certainly going to necessarily involve paying reparations to the people affected by the war, and also reparations in the form of changing the systems that caused and prolonged the war. So I would just like to open to our entire group for, let's just say, about 6 minutes. Any thoughts you have with regard to our current reality of the United States withdrawing its troops from Afghanistan and the consequences of the long, long years of what the book title calls endless war in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and so many other spots where the United States military has been. So I'm just open to any reflections that you might have, and perhaps linked also to what you learned from reading in the book.
I'd like to start just as a Canadian. I had a very strong experience on Thursday because I'm a spiritual director and a spiritual guide for people in the 12 steps, but her son-in-law had an outburst of temper. He worked as in intelligence in Afghanistan. And when Canada withdrew from Afghanistan, because Canada was first involved in building hospitals and building schools and building infrastructure. It was very much a peacekeeping role that they had until they were forced to join in an outright war. And so this guy is suffering from terrible trauma. He has these outbursts. He doesn't know where they're coming from. It's something like PTSD, but I think it's a moral trauma he's experiencing right now. And so I think that we need to really be concerned about these returning soldiers and returning people that are still involved in intelligence. You know, it's really something, how the damage that they have suffered, and people never realized when Desert Storm started, and then the aftermath, the moral and spiritual and psychological damage that these soldiers would be suffering. And they're all coming home now. And what are they coming to? They're coming to COVID. They're coming to, shutdowns, isolation. They're going to be restricted. And so my heart is with them, very much so.
Thank you, Marjorie. Any other thoughts? I noted that
will mention Okinawa, because my father landed on Okinawa and was part of freeing Okinawa from colonialism of Japan. And he said how wonderful the people were and how they fed the US soldiers fresh vegetables and chickens that they hadn't had in ages. And to look at the way the US is treating Okinawa also. And it's the same in poor Korea. It was a colonial of Japan for 100 years, and it was supposed to be freed after the war, and it was divided only for a year. and U.S. did not keep their commitment to Korea, and went in Korean War and just totally bombed villages to the ground and destroyed them. And these are things that I would say the repercussions in U.S. need to be ironed out and made amends for.
Okay. Nancy, thank you for that. Ann Jones wrote a book entitled "War Isn't Over When It's Over." So that idea of the repercussions and the ongoing scarring of the environment, and also the moral injury suffered by the soldiers themselves, are all things that I believe we have to recognize as part of the futility, the utter futility of war. I'd like to turn to Felicia, if it's okay. And Felicia, I do see a couple of hands up, so we'll get to those with your hands up, please. But Felicia, you had written about the importance of naming violence, overcoming violence by defining and naming it and not accommodating it. And I just wonder, since the time that you wrote that, if you have any practical thoughts for us about ways to engage ourselves in naming violence and overcoming it through naming it and not accommodating it.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I see all the other hands, so I want to be mindful of that. I would say the first thought that I had is, especially in regards to Afghanistan, is why does it take the egregious place that we are in for people to maybe even slightly begin to wake up and care? And so how do we come alive, and how do we resist? How do we engage deeply? Naming the injury, seeing violence clearly. How do we do that? And I think repairing if you believe in a concept of the soul, or just repairing a sense of self, is one way. Like I think it was Susan and Chuck Peretti talk about that, and Aryan's work. It sounds like that, like in the body. Not to bring it into navel gazing or too involved in the self, but I would really charge people that are still stuck in the cycle of violence and still stuck in this fog of war, whatever that looks like, to really ask for a moment of clarity, because time's up. So naming the injury, I don't know, that could be a whole call for another 2 hours. But thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. As Felicia was talking, it occurred to me to put into the chat the title of a book by Anand Gopal called "No Good Men Among the Living." And I found it one of the most helpful analyses of the consequences, the violent consequences of the US militarism. Some of you have mentioned the word colonialism, and in a way, I think that just the construction of a base almost guaranteed consequences that involve tremendous violence and corruption in the ways in which people began to, quote, serve the base, but also try to exploit the fact that inside these bases were money and fuel and ammunition and other things that people needed. And so I do strongly recommend that book with regard to Afghanistan. Before we go to the hands up, I'd also just like to touch base with David Swanson. David, a lot of people have joined this gathering because they've read your writing. And I wondered, do you have any sort of updated thoughts about the best ways to get people to, as Felicia says, be agitated, pay more attention to war and militarism. And regarding your experiences with World Beyond War, what do you identify as things that work best in that regard?
Well, I guess the purpose, thank you, Kathy, and thank you all of you. I guess the purpose I had in mind with War is a Lie was to get people to spot the lies more quickly, principally by recognizing that we weren't just being given the wrong answers to questions, but they were completely irrelevant questions. So, you know, every lie about the weapons in Iraq could have been absolute gospel truth, wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference in terms of legalizing, making moral, making practical, starting that war. And it's helpful to tell people information that's been blocked out, that the Taliban was willing to put bin Laden on trial in a third country, and the war was already planned, and the war has been generating terrorism rather than reducing terrorism, and all the rest. But there was never anything remotely resembling an argument for launching the war. Infantile revenge and using a crime as an excuse for a larger crime isn't actually a legal or moral or sensible argument in any way. And so we shouldn't have, the Washington Post now blames the US public for this horrible ending of the war, right? But the US public actually has wanted it ended for over 18 years. But why not for 20 years? Why does there always have to be this gap of a year and a half before people slap their faces and wake up and say, actually, maybe not? And so what I would love for people to be able to do, and of course, everyone on this call can do it, and everyone that we get an hour with and sit down and talk to can do it. But since we don't own a television network, most people can't, it is to recognize that the problem here is not Afghanistan or the way it was done or the way it was handled or the missteps. It's war. It's fucking war. It's not this war or how the war was handled, right? And so we have a war ending, not in the way that anybody on this call would like to imagine a war ending. Right? You have Joe Biden lamenting the human cost of the spending on the war while demanding that Congress increase military spending. Right? You have the Joe Biden's demanding that the papers be released about the Saudi role in 9/11 while selling more weapons to Saudi. Right? You have an ended war with families being blown up with missiles and a commitment to continuing that while the war is ended. Right? You have people in Guantanamo so they can't return to the battlefield they were never on while the battlefield is gone. You have the Patriot Act and all the removals of all of our freedoms still in place with the war on freedom ended, right? And you have a war being ended with talk about moving the resources to more wars. And you have the sanctions and the frozen funds and the lack of embassy and the blaming the victims and the pushing all the old lies plus new ones. No reparations, no talk of undoing wrong, and the media all about the evil and the cruelty and the violence of ending a war, not of the war that's being ended. And so somehow I want to get us to talking about the entire institution of militarism, not a particular atrocity. And so, this is why I offend all my fellow peace activists and just seem weird, bitching and moaning about why I like the Institute for Policy Studies talking about $21 trillion more than the Cost of War Project talking about $8 trillion. I think it actually matters that we not say the military spending of the past 20 years has been 38% wrong. It's been 100% wrong. It's why do we have to take a fraction of it and say these wars were bad but military spending in general at Ronald Reagan levels are just absolutely progressive. I don't get it. I think we need to go after the entire institution. And when you start laying out what could have been done and how the earth could have been saved with $21 trillion, it is different from what you could do with $8 trillion, even though none of us can actually imagine either number. So we gotta start looking at the whole problem and not imagine, that we can reform it.
Well, David, I hope that's going to become your next article, or at least an article in your queue of thoughts that I always say David Swanson writes faster than I think. But thank you. That's very
faster
helpful.
than I think too.
And Ann Wright, you had written in the book that you want to see citizen involvement, that citizen involvement can help foster situations which will be solved with words rather than bullets. And I just wonder, Ann, with your incredible experiences with militarism and peacemaking, do you have any thoughts about ways to foster that citizen involvement that would agitate more people to kind of join the tribes of people that are trying to solve problems with words rather than bullets?
Well, I don't have any sudden bolt of lightning that has given me any particular thing that we are not doing already. I mean, you look at the North Country gang that's been out there for 19 years every Saturday, and it is important. All of these actions, you never know what quite the impact they have. Like, we had a group in Dallas that for years was out in front of the Dallas Federal Center every Friday night, the big traffic going through Dallas, and they had their little signs up, and they decided finally, well, we're going to move because we've been at the federal building. Everybody in these cars has seen us for so long. So they moved over to another place. And then a couple of weeks later, at the new place, a car stopped, and this lady yelled out, she said, "Oh my God, I'm so glad we finally found you. My little girl here, every time we would go past the federal building on Friday, she would say, 'Where was peace? Where did peace go?'" So we found peace. So you never know who is watching. I mean, we know everybody's watching. Everybody's looking to see what others are doing and hopefully getting the courage to join up with you. And things like the words. I mean, we have Chuck and Susan that said they've been doing a lot of writing. And I know Tamara's been doing a lot of writing. David does. This is really important. And the numbers of articles that come out are important. Here I live in Hawaii, in Honolulu, one of the most militarized islands on the earth. We have 4 major military bases right here. It's the head of the Indo-Pacific Command for the military that covers all of the Pacific and all the way over to India. And our newspaper, of course, has to have a lot of pro-military articles in it, and articles that are about what the military is doing, which gives us an opportunity to keep a little peek in there. And we have had some remarkable success in the last month and a half. We have had 3 op-eds, big op-ed articles that have gotten into that paper, and 8 letters to the editor challenging the continuing leasing of state of Hawaii lands. So you just never can tell when the moment might be that all of a sudden the statewide newspaper gets somebody on their editorial board that says, we want to have a little bit different aspect. We want to let the citizens' voices be heard. So I guess my comment is, don't give up. Keep writing, keep out there on the streets. That's the only way that our fellow citizens will know that that there are people that are challenging the militarism that we see on steroids in the United States. And I'll just finish by saying, Biden said, okay, now we're not going to be spending $300 million a day on Afghanistan anymore. And then yesterday or Thursday, here comes the biggest defense budget ever in the history of the United States, which included an extra $25 billion thrown in at the last moment. Here in the Western Pacific, we have horrific, huge, massive war maneuvers in the South China Sea. It's not called the South American Sea, it's the South China Sea, but the United States has all of its American vessels there that are putting pressure on China. A huge number of aircraft that are out here, the potential for inadvertent, mistaken things happening and all of a sudden there'll be a catastrophic military conflagration is very big. So let's not let the Biden administration off the hook just for getting out of Afghanistan finally, which we've all been calling for forever. But we got to keep the pressure on them, as David and everybody else has been saying, that we've got to end this militarization of our country and the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And certainly for all those who've been working with regard to environmental issues, we can't have a rational discussion about solving our problems with regard to the environment if we don't discuss dismantling the militarism, as it sucks up our intellectual energies, our engineering proficiencies, our money, and our resources. And so the wonderful folks up in Maine who've been supportive of Lisa Savage, she ran for Senate, and she also formed a group called the Maine Natural Guard, not the National Guard, the Natural Guard. They actually have a pledge in which every person that takes it pledges that every time they hear a discussion about the environment, they will raise the issue of militarism. Well, we have 3 hands up, and I wish we had more time together, but could we plan to hear from Bill and then Tamara and then Aryan? Bill, thank you for your patience.
Terrific discussion. One thing that hasn't come up yet, excuse me, is one of my inspirations is Elise Boulding's Cultures of Peace. And she says, go places where peace has broken out. And that's been my pursuit in going to Northern Ireland, the Graduate Institute of Peace Studies in South Korea, and now in Burundi, where we're working with the Rotary Foundation, the only nonprofit that's funding peace studies at universities. In the US, we have 4 military academies at huge public expense and no peace academies. Well, Rotary has stepped in and built 7 of them in the world with universities, and it's all fully funded. If anyone gets admitted, they're there. And our young people in Burundi, coming out of civil war, taking advantage of that. And kudos to David Swanson, because World Beyond War has stepped in and supported young kids engaged in peace studies. That's how we rethink these wars, is to start early and build it into the curriculum. An educator would never teach revenge as we did in Afghanistan. An educator would teach cooperation and communication and critical thinking. We have to get this peace studies back into the curriculum. The last thing I'd say is I keep going back to Paul Kennedy's book, The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, that the US is doomed to implode economically because we can't afford this military overstretch. He argues that every empire has imploded because of the cost of its military adventures. So I think that's an important part of this argument. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. There's a book that'll be coming out by Alfred McCoy, which makes that very point by covering the history of at least 4 different empires that, as you say, imploded. And that we I think have such an overreach, and yet pundits are saying, well, maybe the problem is underreach. We have no right whatsoever to be entering into other countries and telling them how to arrange their affairs or control their resources. Tamara, could we hear from you?
Sure, I'll just lower my hand here. So just quickly to address what Bill just said, I did the Rotary International World Peace Fellowship at the University of Bradford from 2013 to 2015, and it was an absolutely fantastic experience. So I'll put a link in the chat for it. Of course, if you know young people who are interested in doing more peace education and activism, that is a really fantastic opportunity. But I wanted to address, Kathy, the question that you posed at the beginning of the discussion about the war and ambassador, that the war in Afghanistan, supposedly coming to an end. And I was thinking that in November of 2001, when the US ambassador to Canada, Paul Cellucci at the time, came to Halifax, where I was living, to do a big gala dinner, I stood in front of the big conference center with a sign, "No war in Afghanistan." I was all by myself, but I had 4 signs I was holding up and hanging from my body. And the RCMP, which is Canada's federal police or paramilitary force, came up to me and said, Paul Salucci, the ambassador, is not going to come through these front doors because you are here. And I said, that's okay. There's hundreds and hundreds of guests who are going to be coming through the front door. So they'll see my signs, no war in Afghanistan. And a few months later, a few of us got together and we formed the Halifax Peace Coalition, and and protested not just the U.S. war in Afghanistan, but the Canada and NATO's war in Afghanistan. I just want to add to what I think Marjorie just said, that right at the beginning of the war in Afghanistan, in the fall of 2001, Canada sent soldiers, special forces, and frigates to the region. Canada, from 2001 to 2014, inflicted a tremendous amount of violence on the country. We committed war crimes, crimes against humanity. The Canadian government and the Canadian media are very good at saying that what Canada is doing is peacekeeping, it's building schools and helping women. But this is just very superficial. It's very much a mask, because what we've been doing behind the scenes is aiding and abetting this horrendous Western domination. So one of the things that we're going to be launching in Canada with the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute, and I encourage everybody on this call too, is as this war is supposedly coming to an end, is to call for a public inquiry and accountability. So we want the Canadian government to have a national inquiry into its failed catastrophic war in Afghanistan that has had a tremendous adverse impact on the people there. And my heart goes out to the people in Afghanistan who have endured displacement, injury, death, destruction, terror, and trauma. And I just think about their collective pain and their collective grief that we have caused them. Thanks.
Thank you, Tamara. I mean, certainly that idea that Felicia had emphasized of naming, defining the violence is something that a commission demanding inquiries be made could do. And, instead we find the generals are populating the talk shows and being given the chance to continue their mode of education. Aryan, thank you. As somebody who's from Afghanistan, I think if we are hearing closing remarks from you and sort of anything you'd want to tell us in terms of ways to go forward, that would be so valuable.
Feeling into my heart, listening to everything that's been said, I'm just so struck by a few things on different levels. One is just the fact of just feeling that through all this chaos and turmoil that we're going through, whether it's in Afghanistan or domestically, we're at a nexus point of transformation. And so this is the time to just really kind of consolidate our physical body and our peacefulness, because it's going to unfold. And I'm so heartened that this situation is bringing up to such a crisis point all of the inequities that you've spoken about, David, all of the polarization and juxtapositions that we also find domestically here, where a child's interest is pitted against a mother's interest, where, so it's playing out domestically, it's playing out internationally. I do feel as an Afghan American that this is a particularly important, crucial time to really understand the correlations that exist domestically and internationally. Of course, there are the themes around war and the environment, but what I really am struck by, even more so than I knew before, is how our collective nervous system is hijacked by this escalation and by this kind of dysregulation. And we're feeling it personally in our urge to action. And we're also feeling it collectively, and it's also amplified by the media. And so when we speak to having a rational conversation, our nervous system and our kind of thinking, analytical frontal cortex is being hijacked by much cruder survival level mechanisms, so we can't hear the words. So to help people feel what they're saying, not to kind of like accelerate into that nervous system amplification, but something very different, where we're not, our actions are aligned with our guts, with our hearts, with our thinking, as a concerted whole, and then we kind of expand together. So that's really about like, how do you resolve conflict? You resolve it within yourself first. And then the second thing about how we all relate is, right now in this community, there are many veterans here who have been distraught by feeling like, has this been in vain? Where their hearts were into, going and helping Afghan people, women and children and all that. And then here's the disillusionment, that comes from that, from seeing the disband that's happened. Now with the refugees coming into each community, I've worked in the past with Lutheran Family Services that is part of the resettlement. And, Afghans have like all of 3 months of some money before they kind of nail down a job, which is kind of working 2 motel shifts and having their kids go to school. And just, so what would be really wonderful, and we're trying to kind of do that as a community, is really sort of maybe starting these kind of small business initiatives that would be social, that would be stay in the hands of this community, partnering with community colleges to create businesses that would also teach Afghans the skills of running a business themselves. Because you know what, at some point, don't know when, all of these Afghans are going to go back to Afghanistan and rebuild there. And I just know that for sure. So I think that it's the greatest healing for all of us to kind of have our veterans who wonder if they were there for naught, just kind of connect with those people that they went in to help with. And if governments have failed us, at least from individual to individual, we can really live the values of belonging to this beautiful life.
Well, thank you, Aryan. It's wonderful to hear your hope that Afghans will return one day. Quite a few of us have been sort of immersed in daily, and I'm sure it's happening with you as well, calls and pleas and cries for help. And it's, it's very uncertain what
it has been uncertain the whole time. This is not. We've been living it for over 20 years. This is not the crisis point.
Right.
It has been going on.
Right. Well, hopefully, when you say we're at a nexus, and the idea of crisis can also, I guess, in the French understanding, mean turn. If this could begin more people contemplating ways to turn away from our insane addiction to war. I want to thank you for the time together. These book club gatherings are scheduled to last for an hour, and an hour goes by very, very quickly. But I hope you'll all find the time to join again next week. Bill Quigley, who has been a lawyer who has represented people in numerous cases. Somebody once joked and said, Bill, I just don't get it. You lose every case, all your clients go to jail. Now you come out of the courtroom and they're all there clapping for you. It's just the way it works. He's been a beloved lawyer and quite a wonderful representative of trying to overcome inequities as well. And then we're also going to be hearing Patricia Heinz is a brilliant former Kateri Peace Conference speaker who has done a great deal on militarism and environment. We'll be hearing from her, from Jim Jennings, founder of Conscience International, and John and Maureen have very kindly agreed to accompany us on each of these gatherings. So let's look forward to being with each other again next week. To Ann and Felicia and David, thank you very much for making time to be with us today. I'm really pleased to meet each of you. I'm certainly going to save the chat, and I will do my best to get that recording. I'd really like to be able to transcribe as much of the recording as possible. So let's look forward to next week as well. And thank you to each of you. Signing off here.
Thanks, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Now, Ilana is saying she has the time to stay on, so I won't end the meeting in case there's anyone else that would like to stay on a little longer, but I wanted to be respectful of those who were planning on an hour.
I was just responding to someone in the chat that said they could stay on for another half an hour. And I'm very appreciative. Sorry. I'm very appreciative. Oh my. I'm appreciative of people's limits. I was just responding to the individual that said they had another half an hour to give it, should anybody else want to.
Well, we have 8 of us remaining, and there's one new message here. It's with regard to the film festival.
Will you be sending a new link for next week and the forthcoming weeks, or should we
No,
hold
I
on?
think it'll always be the same link, but what I'm thinking, Jose, is that I should go through the chat and maybe pick out some of the statements that were made during the chat that might be helpful to us. And then I also, I was really struck by what David had to say, those kind of paradoxes that he listed, and I thought I'd try to get those too. So maybe if it's okay, I'll write back to each of you through that same email. I hope it doesn't land in anybody's spam box. And, you know, I should have also put in the chat my phone number, because anybody's welcome to call me if they have any suggestions for coming weeks.
Kathy, your phone number's in some of the emails.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Great.
So I haven't needed it, but I've recognized that it's available should anybody want it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You know.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great to have you on this call, Jose.
Thank you.
I, like you, share a great appreciation for Roy Bourgeois and Chris Antel. The first time I met Roy, he was a young priest, and he had moved into our neighborhood, and I had responsibility on a particular evening for wrapping up the soup kitchen, which meant you had to make sure all the tables and chairs were put away, and the floors were cleaned, and the bathrooms were cleaned, and nobody was working because they were all surrounding this charismatic young priest. And I was kind of frustrated. And he came up to me and said very warmly, "Hi, my name's Roy Bourgeois." And I remember saying, "Yeah, and I'm Kathy Capitalist. Did you want to do the urinals or the floors?" Well, it turned out the whole neighborhood just was so uplifted by him and loved him. And whoever was the most difficult person to deal with, actually, maybe it should have been me, he would take out for dinner at Easter and at Christmas. And he was just a soul of goodness. So I'm so glad that you've had him in your life. Well, I think perhaps we could just ask, does anybody have other questions or comments you'd want to contribute before we leave this session?
Hi, I'm sorry, I got in. You know what, I just appeared just at the end because I think this must be the same link for the film festival. Can you let me know if that's correct? Because this is very strange that I got onto your meeting. So I'm not some weird person. I am weird, but I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to I didn't mean to gate crash. Can anybody clarify for that? Because I'm in a different time zone. So I think I may have got the times mixed up. But also it's the same link. Because this is, I got a link for the film festival that brought me to your meeting.
Michelle, was this a World Beyond War film festival?
Yeah.
I wonder, David, could you comment on that?
just because I would like to be. I'm so sorry, like, you know, that I
It's
can't.
quite all right. Of course you want.
Since there's only a few of you, I can be embarrassed in front of you guys, although I don't know if you'll
Don't
see
worry.
me.
But Michelle, what time zone are you in?
You know what? Because I've been in different countries at the moment, so maybe I think I was confusing the time. I'm in the UK right now. But
Okay.
is it 2 p.m.? Is it 2 p.m. US
No.
Eastern time right now?
It's 2:12 Eastern time.
Okay, so I actually do have the time wrong
Oh.
because I had actually been in France. So I think maybe if I'd been in France, it would have been, I don't know, because I've been but otherwise, do any of you know if you are also participating in the film festival? Do I?
Well, you know, David is the person who's the executive director of World Beyond War, and I think he might still be on the call. David, do you know anything about the upcoming film festival?
He's walked away. Well, you know what? If I can put my email into the chat, so
Sure.
if it does happen to be a new link that is sent, then I'm hoping it can be sent to me.
Yeah, I think this is an all-purpose link for World Beyond War activities. So I'm almost sure you've got the right link.
Yeah. So, well, I'll put my email there. Oh no, sorry, I actually just sent that not to everybody. So I'll just put it in here. I've been trying to get involved with you guys for a while, but never done any of your meetings. So
Well, lucky for the group to have you. So there you are, Miss Michelle Rafferty at gmail.com.
Yeah.
And I will see what I can find out. I think all roads lead to Greta Zaro. I bet if David doesn't know, Greta will know. So we'll get back to you soon, okay?
Well, I will leave the rest of you. So if you want to speak in privately or anything without me, then you have an opportunity.
Oh, not to worry. It's been nice to meet you, Michelle. Take care now.
And hope to meet you all some other time.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye. Thank you.
In some of the readings, I'm hoping to get a handle on the question as to how various topics take on the narrative they take on. So what am I talking about? In 2004, I'm a retired nurse. My master's graduate paper was on the health effects of global warming. And I had to fight my fights. I want to stop violent language. I had to challenge my professors to let me write that paper because it was in the days of medicines and DRGs and specific healthcare issues. And they said, well, if you could prove that it is a healthcare issue, we will let you write it. So I was able to do that. And that was in the day before climate change became the political football it is now. So we're not going to be able to answer it today, and I'm sure, and we're beginning to fit, all get off the call. But what happened to make the conversation about the environment and climate change a political football? And that could be, and so now it's regarded by many people as an anathema, and other people thinking, the time to wake up. Gun legislation takes on the same emotional tenor. There are just so many concerns we have in the world that I really don't understand how they take on the mantle that they've taken on.
Yeah.
So I'm done.
Ilana, one thought I have about that with regard to health is that, if this gathering had happened, I don't know, 25 years ago, probably at least 5 people on the call would be on their 5th cigarette. It's become so stigmatized to smoke cigarettes. Tobacco is regarded as poison, and healthcare professionals had been making this claim for years and years and years. But now finally, people have recognized, well, we really shouldn't be smoking in public. So I think if we can stigmatize war and not so much let it be a matter of which politicians are going to make money off of the question, but how are we going to preserve people's lives and well-being, that we may find eventually that, just as with, gay rights, with the campaigns to get a solution to AIDS, they worked and they worked and they worked and they worked, and then finally there were some breakthroughs. So I'm hoping that this huge question of ending militarism and abolishing war can go along a trajectory that's much accelerated, because that's what we would need. So I see that we have John and David on the call. John, any closing thoughts here?
Well, I would say that a quote from Kipling has been percolating, and it's simply that if anyone asks, and this is in reference to Afghanistan, but it could be any war, if anyone asks why we died, tell them that our fathers lied.
Thank you.
And that's one thought. The other thought I put in the chat, the most effective thing I think that we can be doing now is, if we don't succeed, we will all go down together, is linking militarism to the climate crisis. You mentioned that briefly, but it is absolutely imperative that we redirect our resources and stop using the resources we have in the manner we have, that the military is polluting the environment in unspeakable, unimaginable quantities. And really, it's, I think the reason why we need to go in that direction is because Ida and the fires in California and the drought in the Southwest and the heat dome and the almost gone polar ice caps are going to be unavoidable. And since we are a reactive creature and everyone will be involved, have skin in the game, as the expression goes, at that point, maybe enough people will start understanding that what John F. Kennedy said was true. If we don't end war, war will end us. Not, he was referencing nuclear weapons probably at the time in 62 or 3, but that is another huge factor that clearly plays into it too, because if India and China go to a war over water shortages, which are looming there, and that would be catastrophic and all connected to the climate. So it's just, it's something that needs more and more attention immediately, and is.
David had put into the chat the name of the book that I mentioned by Alfred McCoy, To Govern the Globe. I think you would find that it sort of jives with what you're saying. I know we need activism more than we need time to read books in some ways, but if you get a chance to take a look at that book, I think you would find it quite helpful. Or let me know and I could send you an email version of it.
Yeah, if you would, that'd be great.
Yeah.
The other thing that, for the few people here, but we can mention it next week too, is the 23rd annual Peace Conference, Kateri Peace Conference, September 18th, Code Red Planet, and it's connecting militarism and the climate with a great number of wonderful speakers. So
great,
and it's on the World Beyond War website.
Well, thanks for the planning. Thanks very much.
So that's my.
All right. Well,
thank you.
John, will catch up with you again next week. Great to see you and hear from you. Ilana, thank you also. I guess I'll go ahead and sign out because Susan Peretti, she's been working so hard on this matter of trying to help with young Afghans who are feeling like they have to get out. And there's precious little we can do, but we keep trying. So I'll call her now because she had asked me if she could talk with me after this call. So thank you, each of you, and I'll go ahead and sign out from this meeting, okay? Bye.